All right, and here we are back again with another remote work chat. And today I am actually with Kathy Watts. We used to work
Hello.
together over at a marketing company. In fact, she still works for them remotely, and part of that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, Kathy, can you give us just a little bit brief overview of just yourself and how you got into remote work?
Yeah, I am Kathy Watts, like he just said, and I in 2012 decided with my husband that we didn't want to live in the U.S. anymore, and we didn't want to have a regular job where we went to an office. So we quit our jobs and we sold everything and we started traveling. And then we did that for a while. And my boss at my old job always wanted me to come back. She would email me all the time and offer me remote work. And so I picked that back up in about 2013 and have been doing that and freelance work ever since from the road. And currently we live in Mexico, but still travel a whole lot. We've kind of slowed down our travel schedule a little bit because it was getting a little tiring. Um, and we wanted a home base again, just to at least have some things.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, so now I work remotely, and I spun my consulting back into a full-time position about a year ago. So I manage a team and I work with another team on all of them.
Oh.
And
Mhm.
my team that I manage is remote freelancers all over the US.
Actually, can you just get that last part real quick again? I got a little bit of stutter there.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So currently I am working remotely from Oaxaca or typically wherever we happen to be traveling, but mostly from
Hmm.
Mexico, from my apartment here or a co-work space. And I work with a team at my company's office in Albuquerque, and then I manage a team of remote freelancers around the US.
Fantastic. So you have been doing this since 2012, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, right before we started recording, you did say that you have been in, 25 different countries, worked from 17 or 18 of them. Um, can you talk a little bit about, the setup that you would have at each one of these different locations, how you would kind of make each country or space your own whenever you get there? Because I think that traveling with a minimum amount of luggage and everything else lends to a very unique space that you're working from.
Yeah, so like any digital nomad, I have as minimal things as I possibly can while still having like a usable workspace that's kind of ergonomically friendly. So I've got I travel with a laptop, speakers, remote backup, so like external hard drives and things like that for what I need. Although like now things are all in the cloud, but when I first started, things weren't in the cloud. And then of
Mm-hmm.
course, keyboard, remote mouse. I also have like this nifty little stand that pops
Ooh,
out and I can stick my
wow.
laptop up on there so I don't have to hunch over all the time. Because I
That is fancy.
Yeah, because I don't always know what kind of workspace I'm going to get. And sometimes it is the bed in the
Right.
hostel, and sometimes it's a fancy desk in a co work space. And currently
Mm-hmm.
it's, a desk or a table in a co work space or my dining room table. And
Mm-hmm.
so I try to keep like all of my little things together, just so that I can like pop them into a tiny little bag and run off to wherever I need to work.
That sounds perfect. So,
Yeah.
what is part of your setup for the things that you feel that you absolutely need to be in your workspace?
I need a really good internet connection and my laptop, and everything else is kind of gravy. And then, of course, all of
Mm-hmm.
my online tools. I use Google Office Suite all the time, Dropbox all the time, Slack
Yeah.
or WhatsApp, and Skype. Like, I would be dead in the water without those sorts of things. And then, of
Oh
course,
yeah,
if I'm
absolutely.
not where I have an internet connection, an ability to hotspot my phone. So I need a good SIM card with a lot of data. So
Interesting. So, how often do you feel that you end up using that the SIM card with data? And maybe it's particular countries that you go to, or
yeah, it depends on the country. And we've spent a lot of time in developing countries and a lot of time in like, you know, first world developed countries as well. And
Mhm.
one doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have better internet than the other. When we lived in Cambodia, I had smoking fast internet and I lived in the country outside of
Oh,
town. And
Nice.
when we were in New Zealand, we exclusively, New Zealand data was like, it's the end of the line for the internet. So we hotspotted our phone.
Right.
We actually bought a hotspot instead of our phone specifically for when we were driving around New Zealand for 3 months, because that was the only way to connect to the internet reliably.
Wow. So how fast of an internet were you getting off of that hotspot?
Oh, like ridiculously slow and super expensive. We were paying by the megabyte.
Oof, rough.
Yeah.
So is there a way that I don't know, you could just use those least data intensive applications, or were you like really aware of that while you were running around of like what you were sending, what you're receiving,
Oh
and
yeah, we were really aware. Yeah, we were definitely really
hmm,
aware. And in fact, I was posting about our trip every day. So I was posting photos and writing every
oh
day. And then,
wow.
of course, I was doing freelance writing at the time. And so I would make sure that everything that needed to be written or put together was put together offline.
Hmm.
And then I would I would connect and just email them off as quickly as I could and then get back offline, basically. And like
Right, right, right.
the pictures were these
Upload.
collages that were the smallest possible size and all sorts of things. And often it would be one of those things where we would be driving down the road 100 miles, with the hotspot out, like trying to find the place where it connected. So,
Oh wow.
yeah.
That's crazy. So you talked a little bit about, the different kinds of tools that you use. That's again, I think the basic things that a lot of people are using nowadays,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
You're
same,
talking about
yeah.
the Google Suite of apps, Slack, Drive, right? Which kind of
Yeah,
part of Google, but you said Dropbox,
yes.
but also WhatsApp. So
WhatsApp,
depending
yeah.
upon, can
I
you talk about
found
the
that,
different? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead, go for it.
No, no, no. You were saying?
Um, I've found that in traveling that WhatsApp, everybody in the world uses WhatsApp.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty exclusively, except Americans, oddly enough, although it's starting to kind of like grow a little bit more in America. But like all of our
Mm-hmm.
friends around the world have been using WhatsApp since before we started traveling. And so if I need to communicate with anybody, I can always find them on WhatsApp. Slack is primarily like work related. And then of course I also, like Google Drive I use for everything, for our personal stuff, for our work stuff. And then, of course, I manage a lot of things with Evernote and Trello as well, which I don't think I mentioned earlier, but I use both of them for project
Okay.
management purposes as well.
Nice. Can you talk about maybe a unique way that you might use these tools that you don't think other people know about?
For work-related things, no, but I
Yeah.
mean, like Trello, we use for all sorts of different things, planning out travel, figuring out like what the itinerary is going to look like for a specific place, or what like
Yeah.
the options are when we're looking. We spend a lot of time prior to going to certain places, paying a lot of attention to the political climate and things like that, because we like to travel in developing countries and often there's a little bit of instability. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
manage that sort of thing in a Trello. We might manage like options for housing or where we're going to stay in a Trello, or what the internet connections are like in a place. All
Right.
sorts of interesting things. We manage our like exercise routine because we still maintain that. Like all of that goes in Trello. So
Yeah, yeah. So it's Trello's more for your personal kind of
yeah,
project management as well as kind of maintaining. Do you use it for business as well?
I do. I do use it for project management to kind of track projects, and it's something that's great because everybody can go in there and like see what's going on or add things in if they need to, or check things off a list that we've created. Yeah, so it kind of I think I found that like Evernote and Trello are super useful just in general for your life and for work.
I agree. So how do you separate those two? Now, Trello is actually pretty easy to separate the difference between like,
Yeah.
the business and the personal. But do you find it's a little bit difficult with Evernote to separate the business notes from the personal notes, and you're seeing both at the same time?
I've got it all color coded, so yeah, no problem
Oh,
at all. Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
Okay.
we're
Okay.
fancy up in here.
Use the color coder.
Yep.
Uh-huh. I like it. So, you know, you have a very unique perspective that, you know, of the people that I haven't really talked to before. You know, most of everybody that I've talked to is working remotely, but they're you know, kind of stationed in this single city. And you, even though you are kind of right now, you have been able to work from all those other different kinds of places before. So can you talk a little bit about what it's like to navigate, you know, going in and choosing a place in a new city, and as well as how that kind of relates to thinking about how you're going to work in that area?
Yeah, because travel and work are incompatible, like fundamentally incompatible. You can't work while you're traveling and you can't travel while you're working. You can do one and then you can do the other kind of, but you can't do it simultaneously. Nobody's sitting on a beach like with their laptop in a hammock. That's a myth.
Right.
And yeah, so when we're looking at how like this, what happens, like there's a lot of things that come into play. Like obviously the top priority always when we're looking to go somewhere new, and we know that I have to work, and my husband also does remote work, so we know he has to work. Like internet is top priority, and I will cross-examine, you know, a hostel owner or an Airbnb host, like back and forth multiple emails to make them understand how important internet is to me. And I'll source it out. Like I'm part of a long-term traveling community, and there's, you know, we're a pretty close-knit group. And so we all share a lot of information as well. So sometimes I'll tap into that and find out where, you know, good places to go. And so then of course it's trying to just
kind of go back for a second. When you're having that conversation with, you know, that hostel owner or, you know, someplace where you're going to be staying, how, you know, how do you remain diligent, and what are the kind of questions that you ask that owner to really make sure that they understand that the strength of the internet is extremely important to you, and they're not just trying to sell you on just getting a room? How do you really negotiate that any red flags that you've seen before in the past of way that they've answered something, or how do you really make sure that the conversations that you're having with them are legitimized compared to them just trying to sell you something?
A lot of times there's no way to do it. You know, like typically I'm just super upfront with them. I let them know that like, this is my business. Like I do have to work, like, and I need strong internet, and I need to understand like either you have strong internet or there's somewhere close by that I can get it. And typically the first response is, yes, we have that, or no. Like a lot of times they're really upfront and they're like, no, the internet's awful. Surprisingly, you know, like, and then typically I'll go back again. If they're like, yeah, it's fine, I'll be like, no, really, is it okay? Because like I need A, B, and C. We've played around in the past with asking people like to send us a speed test screenshot or, you know, things like that. But it typically like isn't something that works out really well. And it's just, you know, at the end of the day, you have to, you know, make your best judgment on whether you think it's going to be a good place or not. And sometimes we hit the mark and sometimes we don't. You know, like we moved into an apartment in Peru in 2015 where we were told they had really great internet, and they did when we first moved in. But when we first moved in, we were the only people in the building. And so as soon as other people moved in, the internet was horrible. And I went to Starbucks every day to work because that was the most reliable place with that was the place with the most reliable internet close to my house.
In Peru, in like a Starbucks, is it also just kind of free internet where you're at the Starbucks, or is it one of those like you have to, you know, buy something, then they'll give you a code, or how does that work?
This one was free internet. I mean, obviously we bought something every day because like the staff knew us. Like they were sad when we left, you know, at the end of our stay in Peru. Like after we'd been like, there, we were like part of the Starbucks family, which is unfortunate because I'm not a Starbucks fan at all. But
Right. But internet, come on.
Yeah, but internet was important, and it was one of those things where I would be there every day when they opened the door because nobody was there in the morning until about 10. So I could work from about 6:30 or 7 in the morning to 10 with really strong internet, and then people would pop in, and the internet would start to tank, and I would go home. You know, like that would be my work day.
Yeah. I remember being actually in South Africa. In South Africa, like there's very little free internet. That's and where I was at in Johannesburg, And it was one of those situations where I started collecting data points where like I'd go in there and go have like a coffee or a snack or something like that, and I'd collect their Wi-Fi code so that I could, because I didn't switch out my SIM card or anything when I got there, and I would just hop from Wi-Fi point to Wi-Fi point whenever I needed to to use my phone for anything.
Yeah, there's actually there's a long-term traveler named Anil, and he has a website called foxnomad.com, and he's one of kind of the original gangsters of long-term like travel and work. And he has an app that lets everybody share and track airport Wi-Fi codes. So if you need the internet code to connect in an airport, you can go on his app and find those. And then of course, long-term travelers share them like crazy. Like, and there's all sorts of tricks. You can often find them in like the Yelp reviews and things like that as well for places.
Interesting, interesting tip there. I like it.
Yeah.
Look for the Yelp reviews. I never even would have thought of that one.
Yeah, it depends on where you are, but a lot of long-term travelers, we look for those on Yelp because people will share them.
Right. What was that website that you had mentioned before?
Oh, foxnomad.com. So fox like the animal.
Yeah. Got it. Sweet. I will definitely go check that out. So remote work, you know, when you're negotiating this idea of remote work, and were you typically within the same time zone, or were you in a different time zone when you were doing this sort of thing? Like now, it's not so bad, right?
So now I'm an hour ahead of my company. When I first went back, we were also living in Mexico at the time for a couple of months. And so I was also an hour ahead, but then we went to Europe. So I was, significantly ahead in time.
Right. And
then after that, we were in Southeast Asia. So I was literally, I think 13 hours ahead. And I was still sitting in on team meetings and things like that. And my boss would just flex those so that they were at the very beginning or very end of both of our days. So very beginning of my day, very end of hers. But yeah, I think, I had already had an established relationship with this company as a full-time employee in the office for years. Yeah. And so we already had that trust built up. And they knew that I was a reliable person and that I, always got my deliverables in when I needed to and was always, very communicative. And that didn't change when I came back as a remote worker. And when I came back, they knew I was remote. I didn't ever come back into the office until last year. But yeah, I think it was, they already knew me. They knew that I could get the work done. And so there wasn't as much negotiation for me personally with them about wanting to go remote. It was mostly you've worked with me before, you want me to come back, this is my situation. If you're okay with that, we can make this work. If you're not okay with that, we can't make this work. So, and
was there anything? Yeah. Was there anything unique about that? Not necessarily negotiation or just that conversation about, well, this is what's going to have to be a little bit different about how we work together because I am going to be working remotely.
Obviously, a lot of things happen on email, more so than being able to walk into somebody's office or call somebody up. It's hard to call me up when I've got a local SIM card for Cambodia and there's I have a Google number, but it doesn't necessarily always ring on my phone.
Right.
And, we're 13 hours apart. So, but yeah, there's always been you cannot be a digital nomad traveling this far remote from your office and working without being really communicative and a really kind of responsible self-starter. Because there's too many distractions. It's not it's just oh, I'm going to go do laundry. It's oh, look, everybody's going to the beach and I've got to work. So,
Right. Was that, again, about this, because there was such a drastic hourly difference in between where the company was based out of and where you were, you said, one of the things that you had to do was anytime that you had to be on a team meeting, right, that had to be at the end and beginning of someone's day. Outside of that, how was, your either your project set up differently, or was it always that that you were, longer term project based. So it was more chunks of getting things done, compared to just like a daily feedback loop or an hourly feedback loop. Did that change at all when you moved over?
It maybe changed a little bit. I mean, I've always done a lot of long-term projects and a lot of last minute, like, oh shoot, we need to get this done. See if Kathy can do it, kind of stuff. And so, yeah, I mean, like, definitely, there's always got to be. I mean, when I'm 13 hours apart, like, obviously, if you want me to do something in the middle of your workday, I'm asleep. So, like, obviously, there was always some understanding that maybe certain times of the day things were going to happen, but that they would know that it would always be in their inbox the next morning when they came in. But definitely, like, there had to be some flexibility with those types of projects. With longer term projects, it's not as big a deal, but with short term things that need to be turned around quickly, like when you're on the other side of the globe, there's got to be some flexibility and expectations.
Right. So you're in a very unique position in the sense that not only are you remote, but you're working remotely for a company that primarily is all in the same building. But then you're also at the same time managing a whole team of people that are in completely different locations from everybody else, right? So can you tell me a little bit about the management of those extra people that are outside the office, as well as corresponding with a whole team that ends up being in the same building?
Yeah, so I mean, like, the biggest challenge obviously is that I'm not there to see anybody face to face in real life,
Right.
and most of the time. And so establishing relationships, like, is a really important part of, like, being on a team. And so I spend a lot of time trying to, like, cultivate and build those relationships in other ways remotely. Like, I try to make sure I'm really communicative. I try to chat with people when I can. I manage my team primarily. They're all freelance consultants. And so, like, all of our correspondence is via email. Occasionally we get on the phone and talk to each other, but, and so, like, we spend a lot of time not just talking about projects, but talking about, like, what's going on in our life, or what's the weather like in Chicago versus Oaxaca, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then I do spend a lot of time building the relationship with people in Albuquerque as well, because they're together all the time. They see each other all the time. They chat over by the coffee maker and things, and I'm not part of that most of the time. I do go back every year for a little bit of time in Albuquerque, so I can spend some time with my family and friends. And so I do go into the office, and that's a really important time to really build those relationships and let people know that I actually am a real person, and not just somebody they're talking to on the phone.
It's not just some automated email that gets sent back out.
Not just some mystery person. So, yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely a challenge when you're working remotely and you never see anybody in person who you work with. To build a relationship where, like, you trust that they're going to do what they say they're going to do, and they trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, and that you enjoy each other, and you don't think that I'm, like, a ridiculous person, like, out traveling the world, or whatever. So yeah, I mean, I think it's like
whatever thing they could,
whatever they're thinking about me, or whatever I'm thinking about them. Like, if you never talk to somebody face to face, it's really hard to know what the tone is like in an email message or a Slack message sometimes. And so, like, there's also a lot of kind of generosity that has to come into play, where, like, I always give you the benefit of the doubt that if you're saying something that maybe I'm reading as snarky, I'm going to give you the benefit of the doubt that that's not how you meant it, because I'm just reading an email and it could go either way.
Oh, I'm the worst kind of person when someone reads the emails that I send out and they were like, "Did you mean something like this?" And I was like, "I didn't even think it came across that way." Also, sometimes my humor doesn't come through exactly the way I want it to. So
sure, like mine too, And so, like, yeah, like, that's always a challenge when the only communication you have with people is electronic.
Right. Do you you said that you sometimes pick up the phone and call them. Do you do many video calls?
Pretty much never. Yeah. Freelancers don't want a video call. They're, like, in their pajamas, like, eating cereal or something. They've got stuff to do. Plus, like, we're not like, like, freelancers don't work a normal, like, 8 to 5 job typically. And so, like, trying to find a time when everybody's free during, like, a regular business hour, that could be challenging. And in my specific situation, even though they're a team, they're all independent. And so we don't really have to have team meetings and things like that with them. But I do have, I have Slack calls with my team in Albuquerque all the time, just like, 2-3 times a week at least. And when I first started working, I Slacked with all of them every single day. So, I do spend a significant amount of time talking to them on the phone, not with video, obviously, because none of us want to look at each other. But, yeah, nobody wants to look at my, freelance hair or whatever. So
freelance hair. That's what the style's called, huh?
Right.
We've got to do like a picture series called Freelance Hair.
Right. Well, you should just look at Will Wheaton's Instagram feed, because he posts like pictures of his bedhead all the time. That's pretty much freelance hair right there. Yeah.
That's perfect. Yeah. So that's pretty much it. I didn't want to make this go on for too much longer. I mean, we've talked for hours on the crazy stories of your travels and working adventures and all sorts of stuff. So I'd love to have you back on maybe sometime later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
But is there anything else that you feel that you could give advice to someone that is either interested in working remotely, or a business owner or a manager that is interested in working with remote employees?
Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely, if it's something that you really want to do, you should, do whatever you can to make yourself a good candidate for it. I think a lot of companies now are interested in remote work, but they're also apprehensive about it and a little bit nervous about it, because they feel like they're giving up some control, or that maybe like they aren't sure whether you're going to be responsible enough to do things. And let's be honest, like I've worked with remote employees in previous positions that should not have been remote employees. I know they were horrible.
Not for everyone.
Yeah, it's not for everyone.
Right.
And like if you can like build those things up, and maybe start like with baby steps where you work like part of a day from home or something, just kind of break them in. I think that, everything is moving that direction towards remote work. But I think a lot of companies are still a little bit nervous about what that means, as far as like workflow goes.
Right. One of the big issues that I've seen with people that are working remotely is that unless they have a system that literally tracks keystrokes and watches your camera and is, completely monitoring your computer while you're working, the whole dynamic shift of working for the number of set hours goes to full on project based and outcome based work, where you really have to have that kind of confidence that they're going to just continuously give you updates, and the updates are going to be reliable and that they deliver on time. And instead of it being, well, you're going to come into the office at this time and you're going to leave at this time and you're going to take lunch around this time, right? It's all about restructuring how you're managing that person from a project base, not necessarily, or an outcome base, not necessarily an hourly base.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like, and I do work regular business hours in this position, and I do flex them around a little bit, but primarily I try to be online and working when my company is in the office and working. And I try to make sure that I'm always available. But I mean, like, it absolutely is about like, you have like communication is key when you have a remote employee or when you are a remote employee. Like, if I ping people on my team and they never respond to me, like I get a little bit nervous about what they're doing. And I'm sure also that, when my boss or somebody at my company tries to find me and they don't know where I am and I haven't given them any indication, I'm sure it makes them nervous too. So, like we try to be really communicative about what's going on, where I am, when I'll be back, all that sort of stuff. But I think, it also is a big challenge when you first go remote, because you feel like you need to be available all the time when you say you're going to be available. Like, there's not like, you don't even want to like walk away to get like a cup of coffee or go to the bathroom, because what if somebody pings you while you're gone and you don't answer them? Like,
oh my God. Yeah.
Sort of thing. And so like, like when you're building up that trust, there's kind of like a little bit of a period of time where you feel like you can't walk away. Like you need to make sure that they understand that you're being responsible and you're there. But yeah, like I think my position now, I'm very fortunate in that like I have a a good professional relationship and a good personal relationship with most of the people who I report to,
Yeah.
and most of the people at my company. And they know that I'm gonna respond to them, and that they know that I'm responsible and available and things like that. And if they don't know where I am, like that pretty much never happens. If I'm not here, I've told them where I'm going. So
Right. Well, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Kathy.
cool. Thank
And
you so much.
like I said, we'll definitely have you back on again. It was awesome, definitely catching up with you a little bit.
Yeah,
And
me too.
we will see you guys next time and another remote work check. Bye.
Bye.
And record.